Hey, yo.
We've covered the original Legends of Wrestling. We talked about Showdown Legends of Wrestling. Hell, we even did an episode on Legends of WrestleMania. But one game based on legendary wrestlers from the past has eluded us in our journey thus far. Alright, let's take a look at how we got here. Acclaim had publishing rights to WWF games starting in the 80s and into almost the entire decade of the 1990s. And by the latter part of those titles, the company also had a hand in developing. WWF Warzone would mark the transition to 3D wrestling for the brand, and this would carry over to the game's sequel, WWF Attitude. After losing the WWF license to THQ, Acclaim would strike a deal with ECW to develop and publish their first venture into the video game world with ECW Hardcore Revolution, which was basically the template from WWF Attitude, with ECW branding, wrestlers, and some minor alterations. ECW Anarchy Rules followed this same formula, resulting in a handful of games that felt rather similar, but this wasn't uncommon for the time. In 2001, with both ECW and WCW gone, and THQ holding a tight grasp on WWF games, Acclaim would begin development on a wrestling title featuring superstars not currently bound by contracts that would otherwise prohibit them from participating in a project as such. And so, on December 3rd, 2001, Legends of Wrestling would hit the PS2 in North America, with the Xbox and GameCube following in 2002. The game would receive decent reviews, in addition to some healthy sales numbers, resulting in development quickly starting for a sequel. Enter Legends of Wrestling 2, released in November of 2002 for the PS2, Xbox, Game Boy Advance, and the Nintendo GameCube, which is the version we'll be covering here today. The game features an intro comprised of wrestlers performing all sorts of moves, taunts, and attacks, with quick cuts, frequent black and white filters, and other effects, all set to the song Superstar by the band Saliva. In fact, the entire soundtrack is comprised of licensed music from bands like Trapped, Earshot, and The Used, amongst others. Sometimes it can feel like there's a bit of a generation gap due to the fact that most of the wrestlers here are from the 70s and 80s, and the music is pretty current to the game's release, but I don't think that really takes away from anything. The roster selection here is pretty vast and spans many decades. Wrestlers such as Hulk Hogan, Jimmy Snuka, the Road Warriors, Bret Hart, Ted DiBiase, Sabu, and Harley Race, amongst others, return here, with over 20 new additions including the likes of Andre the Giant, Bam Bam Bigelow, Bob Backlund, Bobby Heenan, British Bulldog, Bruno Sammartino, Dr. Death, the Steiner Brothers, Roddy Piper, Sid Vicious, and many others. Another cool inclusion here is Eddie Guerrero, who was in between WWE contracts during the time the game was being developed. Sadly, RVD, who was in the first game, would not return here due to contractual agreements. Each wrestler features 4 different attires to choose from, many representing different periods in his career. So you can play as 80s Hulkster or Hollywood Hogan. Not yet so crazy Scott Steiner, or full-blown lunatic big bad booty daddy.
I'll make him bleed!
As you may know, I'm a huge fan of alternate attires, and during this time in gaming it wasn't always offered, so points here for that. Entrances are here, albeit a little lackluster. Animations are nicely done, however the transitions are a bit clunky, leading to some glitchy moments. We do see stuff like pyro, unique lighting, and even entrance videos for arenas that feature video screens. We also hear introductions from former WCW ring announcer David Penzer.
Introducing from Detroit, Michigan, weighing in at 276 pounds,
Due to copyright reasons, most wrestlers' real-life themes are not included in the game, and most appear as copycat versions. Wrestlers with non-exclusive themes like British Bulldog and Jerry the King Lawler get their themes here, as does Hulk Hogan. Well, his WCW theme at least. And while we're on the topic of Jimmy Hart composed themes, just take a moment to appreciate this wonderful piece of musical history.
Up in the mouth of the South, since I was in school, I watched wrestling before it was cool. Who would ever think that I'd live out my dream and wind up on the cover of a wrestling magazine? Hogan is American made, and the only real giant is steel or gray. Jerry Lawler will always be the king, 'cause we are the legends of wrestling. Ray Roddy Piper, Bret the Hitman Hart, Bruno Sammartino, they were legends from the start. Mr. Fuji, Bobby Heenan, $1 Million Man, even Captain Lou, they will always be my friends. Hogan is American made, and the only real giant is steel or gray. Jerry Lawler will always be the king, 'cause we are the legends of wrestling. Where have all our heroes gone?
There's a good selection of arenas to choose from here, from smaller venues like high school gyms to the bigger facilities commonly seen with the larger promotions. Unfortunately, we don't see too much of these arenas due to darker lighting and the fact that they aren't very detailed. In fact, the crowds here aren't even polygonal, instead appearing as flat, two-dimensional objects. But let's be honest here, this isn't a game going for a realistic look to begin with. I mean, check out the wrestlers' models. Everybody appears in this over-exaggerated, almost caricature versions of themselves. But that's not a bad thing. I mean, it fits the era that most of these guys come from anyway. Remember those old LGN toys from the 80s? But how does the game control? Well, it does take a bit of getting used to, not in the sense that it's a complicated formula or anything, but there's a certain sluggishness to the gameplay that one would need to become accustomed to fully enjoy the experience. Standard controls include running with R, picking up weapons with Z, blocking with B, and striking with A. Y is for attack, which are sort of like quick grapple moves, and X is for grapple or tie-up. Pressing either left or right with a strike or attack performs a medium variation, while pressing up or down with either of these will result in a strong one. Once in a grapple, there are multiple options including Irish Whip, a series of standard moves, as well as finishers. Finishers are performed by pressing up on the directional pad after this meter right here has been filled and is flashing. This is achieved by successfully performing moves and taunts. Each finisher has a specific position that the player and opponent must be in. For example, Eddie Guerrero's Frog Splash needs to be performed with him on the turnbuckle and the opponent down on the mat. In addition, we see a reversal system which requires the player on the receiving end of a move to press the corresponding button within a certain time frame, indicated by this yellow portion. Overall, I'd say the animations look pretty good here. Some of them are a bit stiff and on the quicker side, which leads to an unrealistic look at times, but again, it's obvious that realism isn't what they were striving for. We see the Create a Legend mode return here with a healthy selection of options. And thanks to the art style of the game, the created models don't differ much in appearance to the in-game models. For match types, we see standard stuff like one-on-one, four-way, tag team, and even an 8-man tag, which is quite impressive and surprisingly runs without any slowdown, at least here on the GameCube version. We also get a 30-man battle royal, allowing for 4 wrestlers in the ring at a time. But the two biggest match types here are the cage match and ladder match. We've all played that wrestling game before where you start a ladder match, your opponent climbs up and grabs the belt within a few minutes, and the match is over. Well, not here, because the item above the ring that needs to be retrieved will not lower until one of the participants' health meters goes into the red. Once atop the ladder, the player must result in button mashing to retrieve the object and win the match. Sure, the match isn't perfect, but most of that is due to the AI's simplistic, repetitive nature. Cage match. Who doesn't love a good cage match? There are two ways to exit here, including the cage door, which will first need to be roughed up and assaulted before it'll decide to go flying into the first row of the crowd. This is followed by another button mashing effort, after which your wrestler will exit the cage, declaring you the winner. If you choose to exit the cage by climbing up and out, you can do that as well. The cage is deceivingly large though. I mean, look how high this thing reaches. Luckily, it doesn't take long for a wrestler to reach the top, where he can then choose to either launch a diving attack on their opponent or climb out and down for the win. But take too much time at the top and you'll eventually pay the price. In addition to a tournament mode, we see a career mode as well. Here the player will select a wrestler, followed by a territory, or region as they're labeled in the game, and begin their journey for popularity within said region, while also earning coins along the way. Each region features its own promoter complete with unique personalities. Storylines are a bit on the simple side here, but we do see cutscenes, however a bit repetitive. This excitement meter fills during matches when certain achievements are met, such as breaking a pinfall, exhibiting move variety, and winning matches, all adding to a wrestler's overall popularity. We also see some mini-game inclusions here, like the Big John Studd Body Slam Challenge. Coins earned from career mode can be used to purchase wrestlers, arenas, concept art, and other items from the game's shop, which is easier said than done, unfortunately. For some reason, they implemented this 3-tiered coin setup. Green coins are earned, but blue and red coins are needed to purchase items. So how do you get those blue and red coins? Well, gamble with your green coins and hopefully you'll win some of those precious blue and red ones, and not lose too many of your green in the process. The biggest drawback of the GameCube version, besides probably controls, since the GameCube controller is pretty unconventional, but the other biggest drawback here is that the video interviews that were included on the PS2 and Xbox versions didn't make it here, and I'm guessing that has to do with disk space, as I can't imagine why else they wouldn't include them. And yeah, I mean, that's Legends of Wrestling 2. We would see Showdown, Legends of Wrestling complete the series, which was my favorite of the bunch. Which one did you like the most, and what did you think about this game specifically? Let me know down below in that good old comments section, and of course I'd like to thank you all for watching this video, and I'll catch you guys on the flip side. Who says that anymore?